Hello, welcome back to another episode of
Christian Party Girl.
We're your hosts. I'm Jess.
And I'm Julia.
And thank you guys for coming back.
So one thing that Jess and I have been really discussing together is how we can show God through lighthearted things and have stories that are relatable in different ways. Obviously, not everyone has the same story or the same ending to it, but showing that even in the midst of really bad circumstances, there is light. And that light has been so evident in our lives. So please check out our last episodes. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you want to see more of, because ultimately we want to do this for God. We want God to speak through us, and we want everything we say to be for God's kingdom.
Yeah. And I just came back from a mission trip to El Salvador, where beforehand, the week before the mission trip, I remember telling Julia, my life was so chaotic. It was so stressful. I was one of the most stressful weeks I've ever experienced, leading up to a trip, right? Because it's oh, I gotta pack, I gotta plan, I gotta finish all my projects at work, I gotta edit, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta do this. I want to hang out with friends. I'm getting dinner every single night with people, and it was so much all at once. And I remember just asking God, dude, I just need a break. Show up. And one of my friends reached out and she's like, hey, my boyfriend and I are going to this church tonight. It's kind of like worship and testimonies. I really think you should come. And I was like, you know what? This is exactly what my soul needs. Mm-hmm. And that worship night, it was Thursday night. I left on Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. It was exactly what I needed. I was able just to give all the stress over, give all of the craziness over to God, and just say, God, however you want to use me on my mission trip, for these high school kids, for these other leaders that are going with me, show up. Mm-hmm. And just take it all away, take all the worry away. And it was truly one of the most wow moments in my life of just how God works on a grand scheme, mm-hmm. A grand scale. But he's so in the details of things, and it was spectacular.
Yes, and I literally love that you had such an amazing experience, something that everyone should do, something I've never done, but that you come back and you just have this heart for God, and you just have these things you want to say and the things you want to do.
So that was something that we talked a lot about on the trip, trusting in God's timing, and faith is a daily surrender. And that was something very evident to me on this mission trip, was visiting a third world country, trekking through the jungle for hours because these people have no access to food. They have no money. They live in shacks with barely a roof, barely a door. Air conditioning, never a thing ever to be existed, doesn't exist outside of the hotel that we were in. And these people just had so much faith. And it really shook me to my core. Because how can someone who has economically nothing, and they just believe God's going to pull through, because that's all they have is their faith. All they have is God. And, coming back to living in a pretty affluent area that we do, it really shakes you. What's really important in life? What's really, matters is your relationships, and pouring love into people, and pouring Jesus into people, and showing them the love of Christ. And there was this lady when we were trekking through the jungle. I mean, literally trekking through the jungle. I'm not exaggerating. And she had this little garden. She was so proud of. And this is this lady's livelihood. This is all she has to eat outside of the food that we were carrying and provided her. She was one of the stops in the jungle that we stopped at. And she had this beautiful garden. And she was like, come here, come here, come here. A key. And she like pulled off these peppers for a few of us to try. And it took all of me not to just like break down right there because she had nothing, like absolutely nothing. And yet she was still giving these strangers what she had. And I'm like, this is this lady's food. Like for me, it's just a snack or something to try. Like this is her food. This is her livelihood. This is how she survives. And she's still giving it over to us. And that faith that she had, like, I mean, yes, we provided her food as well, but that God was going to pull through. And she even told us, like, we always ask the people, like, what can we pray over for you? And she just said, like, oh, my neck pain, my husband's knee, my daughter's depression. Mm. Nowhere in it did she ever say, like, money or a new home. Wow. Or anything that if I was there, I'd be like, y'all get me out of this. Like, get me into a better spot financially, put me into a more, like, security, like, other things that she's like, I got a roof over my head. I have a family. Like, I have God. And that's all she needed. And she's like, I got my garden. And I'm really proud of it. Like, that's all she needed. And just that level of faith that every day this woman just has to trust God is going to provide for her, that God is going to give her food. God is going to make sure that roof over her head doesn't blow off. Like, it was just, it's like a smack you in the face, kind of, whoa.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for me, it was incredible to watch and just to continually pray over, like, I mean, we went to over a dozen homes and just every single person was like that. So it wasn't just like a one-off. It was every single person we reached into in this community. It was just like opens your eyes to like, wow, it's really important.
Yeah, I think definitely the world we live in, like our culture, is so fixated on keeping up with the Joneses.
Yep.
Having the bigger house, having more money, having the nicer clothes, the newest of everything. And I think it's hard to find God's goodness and God's glory and be truly faithful when bad things happen because our faith isn't being tested. Like in the same way, like that you saw on your mission trip. And I think for me, like a verse that I love that got me through my hard times is James 1. And I'm just gonna read it from here. And I love it so much because in James 1, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." And I mean, in my life, all the trials, all the temptations, all the things that you just look at and you're like, why? Why is this happening? Why do you think I can get through this? And what is the purpose? And I think when you're so fixated on keeping up with your best friend or having the nicer things, you're not focused on like asking God, like, what is your purpose in this? You're focused on why can't I have more?
Yep.
And I think that verse is just so important because those who don't have strong faith, how is God going to use you? Yeah, I mean, you might not feel equipped for it. That's not lacking faith. That is being like lacking your abilities.
Yeah.
And it's okay to lack and doubt your abilities, but when you doubt God's abilities, whole nother thing.
And God's going to pull through in the parts where we fall short.
Absolutely.
for me, like that was when I moved to Georgia. So when COVID hit, I came back from spring break. It was a, maybe you experienced this too. It was a very weird era of time.
Oh yeah, the world stopped.
The world stopped, but in a way, it was a great moment to stop and to look at God too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting on picnic blankets with my friend and being like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I always had this desire ever since I was in high school, very young, to move south. I always just felt like I was meant to be a Southern belle. I hate the cold. I hate the snow, except for like Christmas. I hate it with a burning passion inside of me. And I knew I always was meant to move south.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom used to go and travel to Charlotte, North Carolina a lot. And she always would tell me, I could just see you here, Jess, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like, okay, cool, like Charlotte. Like it's Charlotte. Like that's where I'm meant to go. And like I've said before, I was driving through Atlanta on junior year spring break.
Because you're in traffic, I'm guessing.
It was actually at 2 a.m, so there was no traffic. Fun fact. I know.
That's why you picked Georgia. You avoided the traffic.
Yeah, Atlanta traffic's bad. But it's funny because driving from Indiana to Orlando, you plan your trip around when you will hit Atlanta. Like, it's so, ask anybody up there who has to go through Atlanta, like, it's what you do. So it's like, all right, either we're going to hit Atlanta at 5 in the morning or 8 at night. There's no in between.
Mm-hmm.
Or like right at noon in the middle of the day. Like you plan your trip out so you do not hit Atlanta rush hour traffic. So we went through Atlanta at 2 a.m. I remember exactly where I was on 85. Because even when I drive on this road now, it like kind of overwhelms me every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up at this like particular building and I was like, a voice in my little head said, I'm going to live here one day.
Wow.
And it was like a whisper. And it was like, who's here? Who's there?
Who's in the back seat?
I'm like, who's behind me? Because I mean, that's just how God speaks to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like he whispers, so you're close to him, and like shrugged it off, like whatever, God.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you.
I'm tired. It's 2 a.m.
I'm like, I hear you. About to go on spring break. This is not the time to be having, these internal like debate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I'm exhausted. Did I really hear what I heard? Whatever. So come senior year, or I guess still that junior year, I tried to get internships in Atlanta, didn't get one. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm gonna stay in my college town all throughout summer, whatever. And I also never told anybody about this like thought that I heard.
Really?
I never, and I'm a vocalizer.
Yeah. I
never spoke about it to anybody.
I'm surprised it didn't get like posted on your story.
No.
I heard a voice.
So I was like, okay. Senior year came, still that internal debate was there. I was looking at jobs in Atlanta and all this like internships in Atlanta, whatever, to get me down to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing all the work. I was trying to control when I would move to Atlanta. I'm like, God, you told me this would happen. So why are you not making it happen?
Wow, that's a bold prayer.
And I just kept hearing wait. And I was like, wait on what? What do you mean wait? So then I went out to Colorado for a job. I went to the final interview process and didn't get the job. I'm like, okay, cool. So now it is January of 2020. I have no job offers. I have nothing. I've applied to over 100 jobs and I've heard nothing. God, where are you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's scary, especially during COVID. Like, that's a scary time.
Well, yeah, and then that's when COVID hit, right after spring break. So now it's March. I mean, you probably experienced this too. A bunch of my friends' offers got rescinded.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, thank God for that, because I would have been spiraling if that was the case. So I'm like, okay, God, I know you were saving me from that like stress, because now we're all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to do the one thing I didn't want to do, which was move in with my parents after college. But I do recommend if you can, because you can save money, and you have a healthy relationship with your parents. And it was end of May, or it was like the beginning of May 2020. And again, there's really nothing. And I got a LinkedIn message from this lady. I was like, hey, we have a job opening close to you. We have a new building opening, and you should apply for this job in HR. I was like, okay, cool, lit. Like, this is a Fortune 5 company. Like, are you serious? But in the back of my head, I was like, I've applied to this job of like this company before for like internships. They didn't want me, and now this lady's like reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and I literally ignored it for 2 weeks because in my head I was like, I'm not good enough for this. Like, there's no way I'm gonna get this job. I just had to like give it over to God. God, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. If you want me to have this job, make it happen. Because I have nothing. My parents are stressed. I'm stressed. Like, I need a job. I can't just like live out of my parents' room for the rest of my life. I need a job. So a couple weeks later, I got an interview, and afterwards I was like, crushed it. I was like, that job is mine, and I had so much peace about it. But beforehand, with the job that I applied for, it was a college. Like, it's intended for college students to get into the work field. So you ranked states 1 to 25. Yes. So there's 25 states on the list. You ranked states 1 to 25 of where you would want to go in the country.
What was your number one?
So my parents were right there, and no, but this is like why I say this it's important.
Okay.
So my parents were like, okay, like let's rank them, whatever, and I wanted to put Georgia number 1, but my sister was already 10 hours away at this point, living in Kansas,
right.
And I know deep down in my heart I always wanted to move away, but there was that internal battle, like, is this what God wants for me, or is this just want? And so then I was like, I can't put Georgia number 1. Like, I have to be the one that stays close to my parents. Like, I just have to, like, maybe eventually the Atlanta thing will happen. Like, God said he'll move me there, but maybe it's just not right now in the middle of a pandemic.
Wow.
And I had that, like, I kind of had that peace over that. That maybe it's just not meant to happen right now. I don't know when, but it's just not meant to happen right now. Clearly, I've applied to all these other things, and like nothing's worked out. So maybe Atlanta's just not meant to happen right now. So I put like Indiana 1, Illinois 2, I think like Ohio or Kentucky number 3. I think it was Ohio number 3. So Midwest. Whoa, shocker. And then I put Georgia number 4. And so this was the end of May where I like did all of this. So June hits, a couple weeks later, I get an email that says like, pretty much, hey, we think you're great, but not yet. Wow. I was like, so this wasn't a yes, but this also like wasn't a no. It was a very like weird, like, huh? And I remember I showed it to my parents. I was like, I don't really understand what this means. And they're like, just keep looking, keep applying, trying to encourage me. I was like, okay, cool. July rolls around. The beginning of July rolls around. Get the same email. Hey, we think you're great, but not yet. I'm like, okay, cool. So now I've gotten this twice.
Like the theme of your...
It's the theme of my life. Is literally wait and have faith in the waiting. And I just was like, hey, God, I know I crushed this interview. Why is this not happening? Like what? Like, why are you consistently telling me to wait? And I'm trusting you. I'm putting my faith in you. Like, why do I have to wait though? And I was getting like very frustrated, obviously.
Yeah.
So I would go on walks around my neighborhood. And I would look like a crazy person because I would talk to myself out loud and just be very, very angry with God. But I'd be like, tell me to wait. I'm waiting. But I don't know what I'm waiting for. And 2 weeks later, I, got a text from one of the girls I had an internship last year. She's like, hey, we have a job opening. Happy to give it to you. Whatever. Pretty much just like interview for the job and the job's yours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool, whatever. So interviewed for that job with her, and then a couple of days later, she's like, "Hey, just talk to like our director, VP, whatever it was. Like pretty much once you talk to him, the job is yours."
Wow.
I was like,
I bet that felt like super good at that time. Like that finally, oh my gosh, this is what the waiting's been for.
"Yep," and I was like, "Great." I was like, "Okay, great. This isn't exactly what I wanted. This isn't exactly what I thought was going to happen, but if I have to live at my parents' house for a year and save up money and move to Atlanta in a year from now,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, God, like, I guess it's just what I got to do." And because again, I had made peace with the fact that like maybe Atlanta wasn't going to happen right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the morning I was supposed to have a conversation with this director for this other job, the previous company reaches out, and I never check my email first thing, but something was like, check your email. Woke up, it was 9/11 on the dot, which was a crazy time, I know. I like remember the exact minute. And I woke up, checked my phone, checked my email, and it said, "Congratulations," from this other job that I had interviewed for with the Fortune 5 company. And I immediately started bawling. And I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I got the job.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I got the job. I'm not going to be poor. I'm not going to be broke. I'm not going to be like having to live in my parents' house anymore. Like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And I scroll down.
Uh-oh.
I scroll down. And I see Georgia.
Were your parents nearby?
No, I was in my room alone.
Okay.
I was laying in my bed. And so I was like, because reminder, I put Georgia number 4 on this list.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't care where I went or how fast I went anywhere. Like, just put me somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like, just give me a job. And just kind of giving that up to God. Like, God, whatever, like, maybe this wasn't meant to happen. It's all in your timing. Whatever job's going to happen, it's going to happen. And when I saw Georgia, I started sobbing even harder than I already was. And then I finally like got myself together a little bit, and I looked up where this building was, and it was an hour outside of Atlanta. And I was like, this is why you told me to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, because I gave it all over to him and I stopped trying to guess what God was going to do, that's when he makes things happen. When you try to guess what God's going to do, you're not making room for him to actually do what he says he's going to do.
Absolutely.
Like your grandma Norma used to say is, where is your faith? Where is your faith that God's going to pull through? If you keep trying to guess, if you keep trying to control, if you keep trying to do whatever I think is supposed to happen, whatever I think is meant to be, whatever I think, all of this stuff, you're going around God instead of taking literally a back seat and letting Jesus take the wheel and trusting that you can lean on him and you can trust him with your heart. Even when you don't understand why, you have to wait.
Yeah, I think that's very evident for both of us right now in this period when you're in your mid-20s and all these thoughts are going on in your head. Who am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to marry? What is my purpose? What do you want me to do, God? And it becomes very frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could just say it was so easy. Like, once you find God and you get in your faith and you start the journey, life is easy and life is great. And if you listen to that little voice, life is just going to be smooth sailing. But it's not. It's complicated and dark and joyful and a beautiful part of your life when you're trying to figure out what God wants you to do. But I think it's like you're saying, we just need to let it go, give it to God, and allow him to speak through us and us trying to speak for him.
Yup. Facts. Facts. And throughout my whole journey with that job that I had, there were moments where I was like, why Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
Like that really tested my faith. Why Atlanta? I have two friends.
Yeah. And the job.
And the job that drained
That's
me.
draining you.
I worked nights. It was very draining. I'm like, why Atlanta? Why this job? And I mean, I met one of my very close friends through that job. So obviously very, very thankful for it. And I'm thankful for her. But it's like, why Atlanta? And I was getting very frustrated.
I'd be too. Like, we don't have like Colorado mountains. We don't have rivers like lakes like Michigan.
Yeah.
We got horrible traffic. Love Georgia. Born here, will probably die here. But lots of things about Atlanta that would make me, question it too if I just picked up my stuff and went across the country.
Yeah, and it's like I had such peace moving here. I knew it was the right spot. Because I knew it was God. I was like, all right, God, well, you said you got me, you got me. Everything fell into place. Finding the right apartment, finding every single piece of furniture within my budget. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. Everything just fell into place. In the middle of a pandemic, where things were back ordered for 3 months, I'm like, I need at least a bed and like a couch and food. Like that's pretty much all I need. But just everything fell into place, and I just had such peace for that month of moving to Atlanta. And my parents were like, "Argh." And I was like, Dad, why are you stressed? Like it's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God's gonna let this happen. And he's like, okay, you're right, dude. And I got here, was with this job for 2.5 years, got a promotion, so eventually I wasn't working nights anymore. I was working days, and I got laid off from that job. And I was sitting in my office, one of my coworkers called me and was like, Jess, have you seen this email? I was like, what email? Because I hadn't just checked my emails. No. And we had been talking about the podcast for probably 7 months at this point.
Lots of Starbucks.
A lot of Starbucks conversations, a lot of wrestling with this internal warfare that we were both feeling. We both were getting more and more confident in this podcast and where we wanted to go. How do we want to start it? How, our friends pumped us up to. But I remember I told you more than once.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Julia, if I am going to do this podcast with you, I cannot work at this job.
You did. You said that a lot.
Over a dozen times I said this. So flash forward a few months, and I'm sitting in my office getting a call from my coworker saying, have you seen this email? And I'm like, what email? And I got not one, but 2 emails. And the second one said, you have been laid off effective immediately. You have an hour to get your stuff, and you are no longer required to work with the company until the end, and then your severance ends at this date.
What were you feeling?
I mean, first of all, I was gobsmacked that this is how they treated me. Mm-hmm. I've been with the company for almost 2.5 years at this point. I've gotten 2 promotions. I was on track to get another promotion probably by the end of 2023. Mm-hmm. I was doing all the right things, right?
Yeah.
And
you being the achiever you were probably just like, what did I not do?
But then it wasn't based off of my performance, which gave me a lot of peace. And my first immediate thought was, wow, this sucks. And now I have time for the podcast.
I love that.
And now I have time to really sit with God, and I hadn't made time for him. I hadn't made room for him in my life because I was working 60-hour weeks every week. And I mean, even when we met, all y'all saw like what toll it just like took on me.
it was hard. You were always tired. You were always stressed out, negative even. Like, it just brought out a different side of you.
And once again, because I wasn't leaving, I wasn't removing myself from something.
Mm-hmm.
God took me out of it.
Yeah.
And after that, it was horrible. It was a horrible feeling. It's a horrible experience to go through. Like, but I had so much peace. I said goodbye to all my coworkers, and I had this insane amount of peace. And God was faithful to me. Like I said, I couldn't be at this job and do this podcast, and He got me out.
He did.
And His faithfulness, like time and time again, has just shown up for me. And I was like, all right, God, see, you are going to do what you say you're going to do. Yeah, the theme of my life has been wait, but why do I ever doubt it? Why do I continually doubt what you say you're going to do? It may take a few days, it may take a few years, but you're still going to pull through on what you promised me. And those few months where I didn't have a job, I mean, I was like kind of stressed out. I'm like, but I was every day. It was again, just every day for 60 days, just trusting like, God, you got it. I just signed up for this mission trip in early January when I still had a job, ironically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, God, you are calling me to this mission trip. I'm going on a trip in March to Chile and Argentina. And like, now I got laid off. Like, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to afford my rent? How am I going to afford to live?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, God, you're going to show up for me. So then I got a job the day that I was leaving for my Chile and Argentina trip.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole time I was like, God, like, show up. Like, you're going to provide the right job. I obviously need to do my part.
Yeah.
And do my part in acting faithful towards you and put myself out there, and the right opportunity will come.
Yeah. And
the job I had now was a job I kept seeing when I was at my other job. And I felt like this weird conviction, like I should apply for this. And I should do this. So then after I got laid off, I'm like, I keep seeing this job pop up. I might as well apply for it. And now it's the job I have. And it's just incredible to look back and be like, wow, like, look at what God did. But when you're living in it, it's like,
ugh. It's like, how much longer? Like, when will this end?
God, I've been roaming in the desert. Feels like for 40 years. Where's my promised land? It's just beautiful to honestly like look back and just see how faithful God is and how much God is really in the details of things. When you just truly say like, I can't do this alone. I am tired of trying to control everything and giving it over to Him. It's just, honestly, it's just freeing. So don't doubt it. Don't doubt His faithfulness towards you. And you can give yourself up and give up that control and know that by your faithfulness to Him, He will be faithful back to you.
Absolutely, Jess. No, I mean, where are you guys struggling to put your faith into God? Do you even know what faith is? Have you had an encounter where you've seen God's faithfulness? And if you haven't, or you have, tell us about it. Please send us your faith stories. Send us, if you're struggling with your faith right now, if you're on so fire for God right now, you are ready to quit your job and become a missionary. I'm kind of worried Jess is right there. So be honest with them. Tell them where you're at.
Because He can take it.
Yeah.
And He loves you, and He will never stop pursuing you, even in times where you feel you are alone in the pit. He has not forgotten about you. Even when you are wandering in the desert, He has not forgotten about you. He has not forgotten about the promises He's plans for you. He has not forgotten about what your hopes and your desires and they may change and look a little bit different than what you plan. But God is wonderful, and God will provide more than anything either one of us could ever imagine.
Absolutely.
And has.
Yeah. So thank you guys for coming out, hanging out with us again. We really just wanted to talk more about what faith looks like, what our faith looks like, just because we have had a lot of laughs and jokes in the last few episodes, but we wanted that so you guys could see us for what we've been through, but also where we're at right now, the honest truth of it all. But we love hanging out with you guys. We love getting to share our stories. So please give us feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and just come back next time and join us on another episode of Christian Party Girl.